Time to welcome in the man, the myth, the legend, Scott Van Pelt. Give you some praise right off the bat. Talking about the past, present, future of sports journalism. I think this is a perfect time. Perfect guest right here. Right off the bat, I want to talk about the past. What was the field like when you got into it? How has it kind of evolved over the last, couple decades at this point?
I've been here since 2001, and it's changed massively from then. I think just look at the show that I do. Sports Center with Dan and Keith became this thing, and there were certainly people before Dan and Keith, but I think they're always mentioned as like when Sports Center became something different, I guess, because of how they did it. And in 2001, 2, 3, it was still that. There was still no bottom line. There was still no Twitter. There was no, you weren't fighting with the internet. And so it's changed. I'm sitting on a set as a one-man host of a show that's sort of a hybrid of radio and demands more opinion of the host and looks for more personality from the host. That wouldn't have happened 5 years ago, I don't think. And so I guess our show, the hour we do, is probably the best reflection of how differently ESPN and or the world looks at how TV is produced as it relates to sports.
Yeah, and you talk about, personality, stuff like that. I think a big part in the early 2000s, you got guys like Chris Berman, yourself is part of this. Stuart Scott is a big one to me that sticks out.
For sure.
Whether it's a Sports Center commercial, whether it's just injecting energy into highlights, anything like that. How, vital was that to how you guys operate, to how you guys stand out in a business where you really have to stand out to make a living?
I think that again, you go back to Berman was the godfather of the place in terms of the highlight, and you talk about energy and nicknames and the whole bit that he would do. Rich Eisen and Stuart Scott, Kenny Mayne has been and continues to be, an entirely unique voice and mind in our business. But I think, it helped you to differentiate yourself from others. But then the sticky part became, do you have to do that? I think when I got here, I felt like there was some obligation to do it. I don't think I do very much of it these days. There's a few, lines and jokes or whatever that you'll have, but the idea that I have like a list of catchphrase kind of things, like that, not at all. It's not necessary.
Yeah.
And less so now than ever before, because now I think it almost becomes like a caricature or is seen as shtick. Whereas there was certainly a time when that worked. I think it would be a hell of a lot harder for that to work now.
Yeah, and we talk about adapting, programming, everything like that. Your show is the perfect example, I think, where highlights at this point, you can catch them on social media, you can catch them online on all sorts of different places, all sorts of networks have them. But I guess at this point, discussion, debate, opinions are what make you guys stand out. And you kind of have a unique format with the Midnight Sports Center, but how difficult was it to adapt to this kind of new brand of sports journalism, sports entertainment?
I think it was more my boss's willingness to adapt their philosophy and let us try it. I had done a traditional Sports Center for most of the time I'd been here. And I was coming off doing a radio show that I really liked, and I wanted to take elements of commentary like One Big Thing, or elements of the radio that was on TV that was kind of just throwaway stuff like Best Available Video, and blend that into what we were doing. And you're right about highlights. But I resist the idea that, you can see this on your phone. Yeah, all right, you can see it on your phone. And then if it's a great play or a great moment, you can watch it on your big-ass television in your house later that day. And why you would not want to do that, I don't know. I would completely resist the idea that people would not want to see that again and would rather see some manufactured arguing about something. I don't do that. I won't. Yeah. If I have a real stance or something I'm passionate about, I'll say it and you'll know it. But the idea that you'd have to create some angst and arguments to be compelling, I just disagree with that. It works for people. It would never work for me. I couldn't do it.
Yeah, and social media is just huge in this day and age, whether it's Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, anything like that. But it's also an incredibly dangerous tool at times. We talked a little bit about before this. I guess how important is it? I know you're huge on Twitter, you use it a lot in your programming, but is it more dangerous than good at that point? Do you think there's a nice balance at this point?
I don't know if nice balance is the right way to put it. I think it's an undeniable tool to use, and if you don't, you're a fool. For us, it becomes almost like an army of production assistants, because especially on like a college basketball night or college football day, are you going to see every single moment or play? It's just unreasonable. Even with all the people we have here, something great could happen. Something amazing could happen that we might not see. Somebody on Twitter is like, hey, did you see the catch in the Buffalo-Ball State game? Well, maybe not, but if it's great, somebody there is going to bring it to your attention. We do the gambling stuff with Bad Beats, a horrifying end to a game. Like, we're not just a bunch of degenerate gamblers watching games with money on them, but people out there that bring those to our attention. So the tool that social media can be is undeniable. The danger is in using the opinion that you see in just the people you follow to shape your worldview, and to have that become, oh, this is what everyone thinks. No, that's what the people in your little, if you're only looking through, if that's your lens, right? Well, what can I see out there? I don't know, I can see how much I can see through that. You got to look through a bigger lens at the world to recognize that it's not just that. You can't program through that. If you do, well, then you're going to get a look at the world, because that's not good enough to see through.
Yeah. And you talk about sports gambling and everything like that. I mean, it's a big part of your show, like you said, and you were kind of one of the first people to bring it into that. Mm-hmm. How important was that? What was the process of like getting that into the show? And do you think it's going to be huge in the future, obviously, now that, I mean, it's becoming a big part of life?
Nothing will change for us. Nothing. Yeah. Because, and I would just resist the idea that it's a big part of our show. It's a part of our show, and it's as big a part of a show as the events of the day warrant. If crazy things happen related to gambling, we will talk about them, because we always have. We're not going to do more than we did in the past because now it's legal in New Jersey or Mississippi. I was opposed to the idea that it was some bad thing, because that's dumb. Because states have lotteries and states have casinos, and you can gamble pretty much everywhere. So my point was, you ought to be able to bet on sports too. That was the only thing to me, it's just a common sense look at the world. So now that we're coming along to that, and there's going to be more places where it's legal, all right, cool. But it doesn't mean that I'm suddenly going to start doing more segments on it. We do picks once a week during football. We do Bad Beats on Mondays, and we do, like, we call them a moose, because that's a term that's used in gambling when something happens. And that'll happen once a week, twice a week, sometimes more, sometimes less. That's all we're going to do. All we'll do is what we've always done, which is pay attention to it and talk about it like adults, because people bet on sports.
Yeah, and with social media, we talk a lot about players kind of controlling their own message, whether it's the Players Tribune. You see, like, Gordon Hayward announcing his free agency move on that.
Sure.
I mean, at this point, do you think it's going to be something that becomes more, I guess, not a problem, but something for sports reporters to come back in the future, or do you think it'll always be that complement that, like, they can coexist?
They'll coexist, because that's just like, look at LeBron's announcement on. He announced it was a press release. Yeah. They put it out, signed with the Lakers. Oh, cool. Yeah. There's a
little different than the decision.
Sure, you're in charge of your message, and players more than ever are aware of that, and those that want to craft an image and are careful about it and want to control the message, which is fair. I mean, you want to be in charge of your message and your content. That will continue to be. But you're also going to have people like the Wojs of the world, Adrian Wojnarowski, he's going to try to break the news before it gets broken on Players Tribune or wherever else. Coexist is what they'll be, but the challenge will be, and you'll never, like LeBron, no one was going to get that news from LeBron before he broke that, because he's got a group that's like this around him. But we're talking about a singular star. LeBron occupies his own place in sports at the moment, so he's maybe a bad example. But a star of the level of Gordon Hayward, he wants to be in charge of a message. It was a tough place to leave. It was tough for him to leave Utah, and he wanted to explain that and go through the process, and so he writes something. Well, you'll see more people do that, I think, because there's value in it, and it's it's a good way to continue to be in charge of your brand and your message.
Yeah, and I mean, one final question. We talk a lot about the past, present. I mean, the key thing everyone wants to know about is the future. Where do you think this field is heading? Having known the ins and outs, I know it's an impossible, vague question, but where do you see this field heading over the next 5-10 years at this point?
I'm gonna play to camera. I have no clue. You can beat me if you want, or you don't have to, but I'm just being really honest. I have no idea. And it's a fascinating question, and I think it's really the premise behind what you guys are doing, and I think it's a fun thing to explore. But I can't imagine what it is or what it looks like. 3 years ago, we started doing this show. 5 years ago, I never would have dreamed that I would be given the space to do this. I don't know how many years from now, this show, as we're doing it, will reach a point where people go, no, I'm done with that. So then it'll be incumbent upon me to figure out, well, what interests me and what's something that our viewers would be interested in. Yeah. Maybe we get lucky. Maybe we get a decent run with this. I feel like we already have. I mean, we've already had a good run. But I'm constantly trying to figure out how to make it interesting to me each day so that it's interesting to our viewers. If it becomes app-driven and it's more looking ahead, if gambling leaks into it more, all these things a little bit, but if you're looking for like a drastic 180 where it suddenly is a profoundly different thing, I don't think it'll be that. I mean, this Sports Center is different than the one Dan and Keith did because Dan and Keith didn't have the internet, didn't have Twitter, right? They didn't compete with that. They were telling you things you didn't know the answer to. Everybody's already got the answers to the test. So now it's more in the personality of the host, the opinion of the host, but then the people out there have to be interested in the personality of the host and the opinion of the host. That's hard too. So it's hard, man. It's a hard riddle to solve, and it's one that on a daily basis we're trying to figure out how to get right for us. And I'm lucky enough to be surrounded by a bunch of smart people, and we figure if it lands in a good place for us, then it will for our viewers as well. But I mean, 5 years, I can't even imagine. I don't know how different it'll look. But I do think this. I do think that there's this sense of like, when I was a kid, we were going to have like space cars by now, right? Yeah. We weren't going to have cars. We were going to be flying around in like the Jetsons. You'll have to Google that. That was a cartoon when I was a kid. But like they flew around in little spaceships. We presume that's where we would be by now. I don't think that the television like this, as we know it, will go away. If we follow the NBA Finals, I think people are still interested in hearing me talk to, or somebody, it doesn't have to be me, talk to Steve Kerr and Kevin Durant and Steph Curry and Andre Iguodala and Klay Thompson. Yeah. That was our show. I think people are still interested in that. Perfect. So it'll be whatever the version of that is 5 years from now. I'll be interested to see. Maybe I'll be doing it. Maybe I'll have tapped out by then. I don't know.
Yeah, perfect. Well, that's all I've got. Much appreciated.
I think I see Paul Pierce waiting to talk to you.
Yeah, awesome. Perfect.
I enjoyed talking to you, but Paul Pierce wins that fight.